This time I take the BMW R60/6 out for a spin. Today we're riding a BMW R60/6. This is a 1976 bike, but they were produced from 73 to 76, replacing the earlier 500 model. This bike is 599cc boxer twin with a 180-degree crank. The bore and stroke is 73.6 by 70.5, making it slightly under square. Which you can feel with the power delivery, with being very linear and quite a revvy engine, rather surprisingly. Coming to the front of the bike, we can see it's got drum brakes, front and rear. They're only single leading shoe, so it hasn't got the best stopping power, but it's adequate for the power of the engine, as this engine only produces about 40 horsepower at 6,700 RPM. So it's quite lowly tuned for a 600, but you have to remember this bike wasn't made for speed, it was made as a tourer, a nice reliable touring bike, and it does that job very well.
Only the R60s have the drum brake as well. All the other models tended to have the disc brakes, which probably worked a lot better, but you can argue that's a lot easier to fix at the side of a road, so that's one benefit I can tell.
That's very true. Although if you wanted to splash a bit more cash, you could. I believe the sports model did feature disc brakes at the front. Another thing you notice about this bike is that it's shaft drive, so no annoying chains to look after, which again goes to help this bike be a great tourer. And another thing you notice on the side of the bike is the kickstart. As opposed to normal traditional kickstarts you'll see on a lot of Brit bikes and early Italian bikes, it's not straight to the side of the engine, which can take some getting used to, as you have to kick sideways, which is probably best to do on centre stand unless you want to snap your side stand. But from what I've seen, they start pretty well with the kickstart, and they're quite reliable. I think it goes to show that the Germans clearly didn't trust their starter motors very much if they stuck these things on. So Jamie, can you tell me a bit about your bike? When about did you buy it?
Yeah, it was just over a year ago I bought it, and it came in at my work, and I knew about the bike beforehand, and I liked it because its originality and its story, and the fact that it is such a usable bike for its age as well.
So do you know much about the history of this bike, Jamie?
Yeah, well, I know a bit about it. It was an ex-police bike for London Metropolitan, which I do have some pictures of when it was first stationed there, so it could have escorted the Queen. You never know. It's a mystery what it could have done in London. I don't know how long it was in service for, but it still holds a lot of its original features. I think one of the side panels on this side is the original paintwork on the tank, and many other parts, details on the top of the tank, such as the butty box I call it on the top. I don't know what they're putting in their speeding tickets perhaps, or walkie-talkies, who knows. Originally it's supposed to have a balanced front mudguard, which I've swapped over unfortunately, because on the road the wind used to catch the valance section and sort of wanted to make you go places you didn't want to, so that's been changed over. The police issue ones would have had Craven side panniers, which I do have what might have been the correct ones for the bike, but they're way more practical and a lot easier to use. I was saying, Matt, like as you mentioned, that's there for a reason, because these do tend to fall off. So on the /6 they changed to a slightly modernised switchgear compared to the earlier models, where this is just your lights on the left and high beam, etc., your horn, starter button, kill switch, and your indicators, which take a while to get used to because it's not left or right, it's up down. Another part to mention on the bike is the carburettors, which is an ongoing theme with this bike. They only have the slide carbs instead of the CV ones, which the higher range models had, which it probably does impact its performance and its response on the throttle, but it's another thing which makes it an easier bike to go around the world on, which it's been done many a times with this model.
A lot of people may know this bike from a woman by the name of Elsbeth Beard, who rode this bike around the world. Many people may have seen her on social media or read her books, and I think these bikes have really come into fame because of her. But again, it just goes to show how reliable and sturdy these bikes are, as from reading her books, you dropped this bike quite a few times and still picked it up. But then that's just 70s bikes in general, not a lot of plastic and a lot of metal. Just like Guzzi's, this thing has a few false neutrals, but I think it's standard of the time. But yeah, we'll just take this thing for a little spin, we'll see how it handles and feels. I'd say this bike handles quite well. It feels very smooth on the corners. Oh, it's disappointing. I was quite expecting it to feel a little bit. Oh. I was expecting it to feel a little bit heavy on the corners. You know, if you're conscious of the pots, but it handles quite smoothly. It's very light, and after all, this is quite a heavy bike, so it is rather surprising, really. One thing I have to say, to get used to this bike, it's got a very weird, very German indicator system. It's got like a flick switch down for right and up for left, I think, which definitely takes some getting used to. Yeah, this bike feels like other bikes I've had. It's very linear. It feels almost like a straight four, in the way it just produces its power and just in a straight line. There's no obvious like step you'd get with 90-degree V-twins, or even 360-degree crank Paolo twins. But yeah, it produces power in a very smooth, reliable way, and it's a very smooth bike. We're sitting now at about 3,500 RPM, and it just feels solid. We'll take it into corners. It holds corners quite well. It feels very nice. Yeah, this is it's a mechanically loud bike, which is ironic seeing how quiet the exhaust is. While running it, you definitely hear a reasonable amount of chitter chatter and the purr of the engine, and it's quite a pleasant intake purr. Yeah, it does pull reasonably well. It's not, of course, the quickest bike. I believe it's only 40 horsepower, but then, you know, it is still a 600. It's reasonably torquey. And I think, unlike a lot of Brit twins, it's a very smooth bike, very, very smooth. I feel like this bike would happily sit at high RPM and just sit there all day. But feeling like my BMW I previously owned, these bikes have got a very shockingly powerful engine brake. You let go of the throttle and between gears they properly chuck you into the tank, which I think does take getting used to, especially if you're used to multis. See how this thing pulls. Yeah, at higher revs this thing does seem to pull quite nicely. And yeah, it slips into gear, I think, when the engine's turning pretty nicely, I have to say. Sitting on this bike, it does feel quite tall. That's one thing I noticed the second I jumped on it. The seat feels quite high and it's quite a sit up and back seated position. You're a little canted forwards, but it is still quite comfortable. But yeah, you on the road you feel quite tall. And from down the rev range it can go quite low and stay really quite smooth. Now to turn into here I have to double check. Wrong one. Right one. See, I've only been riding it for a second or two now and I'm making it look quite difficult with the indicators. And again, going down to 30 in top gear, it feels really smooth. It's quite, again, as I've said previously, it's quite a lowly geared bike, but you know, even in top gear it just feels comfortable everywhere. You can definitely see that this bike was made for touring. This is a bike you really don't have to change the gear very often at all on. Kind of just roll out of a corner, roll on the throttle, and it'll slowly crawl up to speed. Yeah, rather similar to IS Brit bikes of the 70s. This bike seems to kind of lose some of its legs after about 75. It's not the most freely revving. It takes a while to get up to high RPM. I think it's a bike that was really made to just sit in top gear and just sit there all day. Now this bike has got two drum brakes, front and rear, and they're both single leading shoe. The brakes on this, they're not amazing, but I think if you've ridden 1950s bikes, 1950s and 60s Brit bikes, they're about what you'd expect really. They're not shockingly powerful, but they're definitely there. Definitely have to give them a good squeeze to get power out of them. One thing I've noticed quite surprisingly on this bike, for a bike of the 70s, it's got a very quiet exhaust system, which you'd be, you know, quite shocked to expect, I think. A lot of the bikes of the 70s are all rather loud, and this thing's just purrs along very quietly. To be honest with you, when it first started, I couldn't really tell it was on. But yeah. I think showing the bike's age, it's got a very, I suppose, crunchy gearbox, but it's an old bike, we can let it off. I've ridden Guzzi, so I can't say a whole lot. But it's got a very positive click to the gearbox, and it goes into gear, apart from the crunch, reasonably well, so. Yeah, I really have to just thank Jim for giving me the opportunity for riding this bike. It's a very sweet ride. He talks about it quite lowly, saying it's old and tatty, but I think it truly is a beautiful bike. I think it's got a lovely patina to it. I think everyone will agree or watch the video. It's really quite a beautiful bike. As I was saying, it's not a bike that's gonna make your heart throb, but it just feels good. So to sum up, although this bike lacks the charisma of say a Moto Guzzi Le Mans or an Auto Commando, that's not to say it isn't a good bike. It's a great classic, and it's still a good commuter today, whether it's to go to the shops or around the world. What bikes would you like us to cover in future videos, and if you've got a bike you'd like us to test ride, don't forget to get into contact below. And if you enjoyed that video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks very much for watching.